at a time, so it'd take us maybe 3 to 4 years at the most to get the data in that we need. This approach here, I think it's probably more common in the industry now, and we think that the information we're going to get here will really help us better do the analysis that we need to do on our streets. And so what does that mean? Well, we use this type of information to determine when streets either need to be, seal coated or resurfaced or reconstructed. Really, that information really helps us develop our capital program. But this information also is really going to also help us in looking at some long-term strategies of where we want to go with our infrastructure on our streets. So this is something we're obviously very supportive of, and we think that it's well worth the investment.
We have a comment highlight probably from Councilmember Reich on this particular slide.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think you've articulated well the advantages we hope to gain from this reorganization that both speak to interdepartmental efficiencies, also external activities that will be enhanced by this with our department partners and of course external partners. But I think there's also a hope for a bottom line benefit in terms of planning in this particular fashion in advance. We've had examples of it ad hoc in the past, but hopefully we're trying to take advantage of it on a more continuous basis, and perhaps you can touch on that, particularly in light of one of your previous charts where it shows how much outside revenue we need to get the work done that we need to get done.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Reich, yes, with this entire division, I mean, there's a number of reasons we created it. One is to do, I wouldn't say do more community engagement, but do earlier community engagement so that we're really understanding the scope of the projects that we are going to be moving forward on. Another aspect of that as well is we apply for federal funding quite a few years in advance for projects, and to better understand, once again, the scope of what we're applying for so that when the federal funding does come available, that it matches very closely into the intent of the project. This, as I mentioned earlier also, this group works very closely with other agencies, both at Met Council as well as at both the state and Hennepin County level, to ensure that the projects that we're proposing are being coordinated with the work that they're doing. So let me continue on this. I didn't get to the second enhancement. We have a $174,000 ongoing enhancement request for both professional services and what we refer to as partnerships. So what this is for is, once again, this group gets involved very much in a lot of studies throughout the city, and I think pretty much in every ward there's a request for traffic studies, analysis of transportation issues that we have in the various wards. Some of these dollars will just help offset the expense of hiring consultants to assist us with that analysis. It also will help us with for example, there's some dollars in here for Bike Week. Bike Week is something that the city very much supports, and we have dollars identified in here to help fund some of the cost of Bike Week. And there's also, we have some membership fees. For example, the Northern Lights Express, Passenger Rail Alliance, and Streetcar Coalition. These are not real large dollar amounts, but these are important organizations to belong to, and these dollars here will help cover the expenses of those memberships. All right, and I think our last general fund program that I wanted to mention is just our administration. This is our myself and Heidi and Brett work out of the administration program in Public Works, but the administration program actually does a lot more work than just administration. We're very involved in the departments, for example, safety and training. You can see what we just recently, the photo there with the on the bridge. We just worked with the fire department and the emergency operations group on doing rescues out of the river. And so we do our safety training, and finance oversight is handled out of this administration group. So that is the kind of wraps up the general fund component of Public Works, and I'll be moving on to the enterprise funds, unless there's any questions back on the general fund. All right, well, I think we're doing good from a time perspective. So enterprise funds, this is the enterprise funds within Public Works. You can see that they're all large organizations. They generally, dollar-wise, are somewhat equal amongst all 5 of them. So let me walk through and start with solid waste and recycling division. As you know, in solid waste and recycling, we provide services for what we call our residential buildings in the city, which are 4 units and smaller. So just for perhaps those watching and listening, so the city provides solid waste and recycling services for our residents, 4 units and below. Units larger than that are handled by the private sector. And this includes collection and disposal of solid waste and collection of recyclable materials. And of course, now we're rolling out our organics collection. Just real quickly on that, we're just wrapped up what we call phase 1 of our citywide organics process. I think we have about 31% sign up, which is about 33,000 households. So that's we're pretty impressed with that, and we'll continue to work on getting more households signed up. And then we'll be rolling into phase 2 of our organics collection next spring, and including that, I think hopefully by June, David, was that the idea? So hopefully we'll be fully implemented of our organics system by June of next year. We do have one enhancement request here, and it is a general fund enhancement request, and it's for $50,000. And we decided that this would just be a one-time request. But this has more to do with the city's initiatives associated with Towards Zero Waste, and that our solid waste and recycling division, so the revenue sources that we get for this entire division come from the fees that we charge our residential customers for solid waste and recycling services. But the Towards Zero Waste initiatives are really a citywide program that would benefit everybody in the city of Minneapolis. So we thought it'd be more appropriate that this would be, that component of their work would be a general fund supported program. So some particulars, you can see the council adopted 2015 budget compared to the 2016 mayor recommended. Somewhat very similar, a little bit less in the associated FTEs. So the 2016 budget fully funds the implementation of the organics program, and I'll probably speak to this on the next slide here about how the organics program impacted rates. This budget also does include dollars for a new maintenance facility for our solid waste group, solid waste and recycling group. They're currently up at a facility at 2710 Pacific. It's right along the river, and it's an older facility. It has been declared that it needs to be replaced. Our concerns with actually replacing it on that site, this is right along the river, and that at some point in the future, we'd love to be able to see the parkway and the land along the river improved. So we did not want to build a building on that particular portion. So we are exploring other sites right now for a new facility for our solid waste and recycling group. So here are the proposed rates. We put them usually in a 5-year plan, but obviously the rate that you're adopting would be the 2016 rate. Wanted to explain this a bit, that the rollout of our new organics collection system, we phase that in really over a couple of years. So the rate increase that we saw in 2015, and then you can see that the rate increase for 2016 is a bit higher at 4.9%. That will cover the entire cost of rolling out the organics program. The other thing that really assisted us in rolling out the organics program is we did have a fund balance that allowed us to use some of the dollars out of that fund balance to help offset the expenses associated with rolling out the organics program, such as purchasing additional trucks and so forth.
Mr. Cockey, Council President Johnson has a comment. Question.
Mr. Cockey, can you go back to the slide before this, please? Mm-hmm. So the mayor's recommending a decrease in the adopted budget of $400,000. Why would we increase people's rate if we've cut the budget?
As I was mentioning before, I believe, staff can feel free to jump in and add to this, but in 2015, we asked for additional dollars, but some of that was actually spending our fund balance. So it wasn't necessarily associated directly with the rate. It was associated with, it's an expenditure budget, and even if we're using it out of our fund balance, we still need an appropriation for that expenditure. So that is really, I think, the difference between the two is that the pro forma indicates that we would need the rate increase that we're recommending, and the reason that it was dropped was as we were rolling out of the organics program in 2015, we're using fund balance.
Didn't we raise the rates in 15 though too?
We did.
Okay, I want to know that number.
Would you be able to provide that? Do you have the number from 2014 to 2015?
I can provide that number to you here. This is you can see on this slide, we do have the dollar amount for the 2015, but the rate increase was significant in 2015. Pardon me? Right. Yep. So we can show you.
So it's probably I mean, if it's 4.9 is 18.
Well, we had an 18% increase from 2014 to 2015.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I sure am glad I voted against that.
Okay, moving on to our water treatment and distribution division. I think pretty all familiar with the basic services we provide. We have 2 treatment plants and about 1,000 miles of pipe throughout our system. We sell water not just to the residents and people who live and work in Minneapolis, but to 7 other cities, including the airport. So this is our proposed budget for 2016. Some of the things I just wanted to mention is that a lot of our focus right now up at Water in the probably a good portion of the rate increase that you're seeing from 2015 to 2016 is associated with capital improvements. We have an aggressive capital program, both primarily on the treatment facilities, but also on the distribution system as well. One of the things that we're obviously focusing very heavily on throughout the department, but also in water, is asset management. We're implementing the rollout of an asset management program called Maximo. We're continuing to invest in really evaluating what we call the condition assessment of our system. One of the things that we've just concluded recently, we were able to actually go out throughout our entire distribution system and do an analysis of the condition of our pipes and are they leaking. And we're about 3/4 the way through, Glenn. We're about 3/4 the way through testing. And what we have found surprisingly, and very surprisingly compared to other cities, is that the amount of leakage that we have in our distribution system is very, very minimal. So we're quite pleased with that, given particularly the age of our system. This is the 5-year recommendation for raise, and once again, you would be acting on the 2016 rate. And as I mentioned earlier, the 4% increase is primarily due to capital expenses associated with the Fridley maintenance or the Fridley treatment plant. We also do have dollars in here for a new facility for our water distribution facility, as well as some improvements up at our Columbia Heights treatment facility. Sanitary sewer. So we are sanitary sewers in our surface water and sewers division. The primary focus here is to really do capital maintenance work on our 800 plus miles of sanitary sewer pipe in the city. Just maybe for the audience listening, so in the city of Minneapolis, it's our responsibility to collect sanitary sewage, but then we send it down to the MetConsol's plant for treatment. So this is all about collection. Besides just sanitary pipes, we have 5.5 miles of sanitary tunnels and pump stations. The other thing I wanted to mention here is that about 75% of our sanitary budget, so of this recommended $59.9 million for 2016, about 75% of that is really a payment to MetConsol for the treatment of our sanitary sewage. So the cost of that we are charged by MetConsol for that treatment is the primary factor on the rates that we charge for our sanitary sewage fees.
Mr. Kaki, I was just kind of looking at this a little bit. I'm seeing that it assumes a 5.5 MetConsol rate increase. Obviously, the budget was presented or created over the spring, delivered in August. Is that number accurate? How did we do? 4.8. Okay.
4.8. So, Mr. Chair, let me respond to that a little bit better. So you're absolutely right. This is one of the a little bit challenging parts. As we set our budgets and make recommendations to the mayor back in June, what MetConsol will actually be charging, usually we don't find that out until later in the fall. So this is a number that we occasionally will actually modify the rate depending on what we discover from MetConsol. But I think that in this year, though, that we would like to stick with the rate that we're recommending here at 6.9% or $24.64 as an average cost.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Just real quick, maybe just to hit on the the highlights a little bit more is similar to water. This is Lisa Cerny's group. They are also very much focusing on condition assessment and determining, exactly, what is the condition of our infrastructure so that we can plan repairs and capital improvements accordingly. We have this term in here called supplemental cleaning. What that is really referencing is we're actually taking on a new cleaning activity in our larger sewer pipes, which typically we hadn't done before, hadn't need to do before, but due to a lot of low flows that we're seeing in some of these larger pipes, it's requiring us to go in and do some additional cleaning that we haven't done in the past. To expound on that a little bit, the reason for that is, so years ago, we used to have a combined system. So some of these pipes were very large to handle both storm and sanitary. And then as we've divided that system up and we have our own storm sewer system, we have our own sanitary system, the amount of actually water flowing through these pipes have decreased. And then, of course, over the years, one of the things we've worked very, very hard on is to try to get what we call the clean water, the storm water, out of our sanitary system. And they've made some great progress on that. And that's good. But what that also means is we have a little bit less flow going through some of these very large pipes, which is causing more collection of debris and so forth. So we're having to do more cleaning on some of those large pipes than we used to. So this is the rates that we're recommending for 2016 and beyond. And I'll maybe just touch on again, Met Council is, so, probably the rates through 2017 through 2020 will be dependent, of course, on Met Council's rates that they will be charging the city. Our stormwater program, which is also in Surface Water and Sewers Division, obviously the intent here is to manage our both the quantity of our stormwater for avoiding flooding, but also to try to improve the quality of that water before it dumps into our lakes and streams. It's very much a capital and maintenance activities associated with both pipes, and obviously we also have a lot of stormwater tunnels, which have been probably one of our bigger challenges over the years. One of the things that you'll see here, I'll just jump into the next slide here, is that this is our budget for stormwater collection. The other thing that we do in our stormwater budget is we pay for street cleaning, because one of the primary purposes of doing our street cleaning is to make sure that the water that runs off the streets into the catch basins and into our lakes and streams are clean. So that's the primary purpose of having the street cleaning as part of this funding package. So you can see here that we have a 0% rate increase. And the reason of this is that we have a very healthy fund balance in our stormwater fund. And so we're not recommending any rate increases over the next 5 years. Some of the reasons for the fund balance being where it is associated with our tunnel systems. A few years back, when we did an initial evaluation of our tunnel systems, we had some grave concerns that we had some very, very large expenses associated with repair of our storm tunnels. As we've been doing more work and more investigation on them, the situation has improved. Now, we still have issues with our storm tunnels, but for example, the manner in which we can actually even repair them, we've come up with some better methodologies that are less expensive than what we had previously thought. So the end result of that is that we do have some increases in expenses, which you can see here. We do have an increase in expenses, but we're able to cover that with the fund balance that we currently have. So this is just a summary slide of our utility group, and the total what's being proposed for 2016 and the percent change overall. Probably the largest portion of that obviously is associated with the sanitary rate increase for 2016.
Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kaki, on that, whatever the Met Council, we assumed a 5.5, I think, percent increase. Do we have input into that at all? And other cities are in the same boat as us, obviously. How do we, I mean, that's a bigger than inflation number. How do we react to that?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, we do have conversations, and we've talked to them extensively about, can you explain to us what that rate, why they're proposing the rate increase they have, and they have provided us that information. Lisa, would you like to speak a little bit to that and maybe your interaction with the Met Council on rates?
Mr. Chair, Council President Johnson, the Met Council has what they call a public hearing type of meeting about their rates. And this year they did provide a significant amount of detail on why their rate increase. Much of it is tied to capital improvements that they are making on their systems, system-wide, as well as their plans.
So we're still
Subsidizing for
funding their overbuilding.
The way
that's why I remember it coming in front of us, but whatever. You don't have to comment on that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you. All right. The next enterprise group we have is our parking system. Obviously, we separate this out differently than our utilities, just from the fact that our enterprises are funded through monthly bills. Obviously, parking is through charges at the ramps and meters. Let me just speak kind of generally. I was just having this conversation with finance the other day as we were looking at the parking fund and the parking system performance. Is that the system is actually performing quite well. A few years back, we had some concerns that the trend in the parking fund was going down, and we had some concerns. I think some of that was associated with the economy, and our parking system is very much reliant on what's happening with our economy and the trends going on downtown. But it's a robust economy, and things are going well, and so our parking ramps are performing quite well. We have also, over the years, have moved to technologies now that have lowered some of our expenses in operating the parking ramps, and obviously working on improving both customer service, but really that continued focus on technology. Some of the initiatives that we have going on is the car sharing pilot, which we've taken to the next phase, and so we'll be returning actually to Transportation and Public Works Committee October 27th, I believe, to update the council on where we're going to be going with the car sharing program over the this next year. Our pay by phone system, which allows you to access parking meters through your phone, we have a pilot running in the North Loop neighborhood right now. And John, if I understood this correct from your communicate to me the other day, the pilot we were going to actually roll it out in 3 phases, but the pilot has worked out so well that we're actually going to change that just really into, once the pilot's completed, rolling it out citywide. We feel we don't need to do a second pilot or in a bigger area, that we're comfortable that the program's working well enough, so we'll be rolling it out citywide here I think by the end of the year. Is that right? So that's exciting.
Mr. Kaka, you mentioned how new technologies were really helpful in controlling and reducing costs of operations in lots and other things. I assume what you're talking about now is somehow these new technologies are helping increase revenues to support those enterprise funds. Is that a fair assessment? And can you quantify how revenues are doing since the advent of the new technology?
Let me talk about, obviously, one of the big technology changes that we made in the past few years is the new parking meters themselves and going to the multi-space parking meters that accept credit cards. And so we've seen a very large jump in revenues in the on-street parking system over the last few years where we implemented that. Let's see if my numbers are correct here. I think we had somewhere from like a $7.5 million in 2011 up to about $12.7 million in 2015. So a substantial jump in revenues on our on-street parking meter systems with the implementation of our new parking meters. What I do know is that that is leveling out. That is really where we were just evaluating our revenue streams and our system for 2015, and that seems to stabilize, which I think makes sense. Now, I guess the question is with, for example, the pay by phone will we see any kind of increase in revenues from that, or is that just going to be kind of a customer service component? At this point, I think it's hard to say, but we'll certainly know next year once we roll that out.
Yeah, thank you.
Just one last initiative that is on the slide I do want to mention is we very much intend to make facility improvements at our impound lot this